Hi, my name is Olivia. I still remember the sound of her laugh. Not the kind that warms a room or invites you to join in. No, hers was sharp, clipped, soaked in something bitter and smug. The kind of laugh that says, I won. That morning, my whole world had been turned upside down, but her laugh stayed with me. It echoed in my chest like the last sound before a door slammed shut. I had worked for 3 years straight without taking a single vacation. I stayed late when no one asked, volunteered when others ducked their heads, and trained half the interns that now pretended not to see me in the halls. I wasn't the most outspoken or flashy, but I knew what I was doing. Numbers, forecasts, teams, I ran them like clockwork. But none of that mattered when Jenna decided she needed a fall girl. I didn't expect to be fired that day. It was a Monday, the kind of gray morning where everything feels half awake. I had my usual black coffee in one hand and my laptop bag slung over my shoulder when I stepped into the office. The lights were already on, though it was still early, and a strange stillness filled the floor. I walked to my desk and stopped short. A little box sat there. My name, scribbled in black ink. Inside it, my favorite mug, a pen set I got for hitting my sales target, and a printout of a memo I'd never seen before. HR had packed my desk for me. The meeting room door behind me opened, and Jenna stepped out, hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, a folder in her arms like she was about to present to a boardroom. She glanced at me once and smirked, just enough to say she'd won something I didn't even know we were fighting over. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I was called into a small room where 2 people from HR, neither of whom had ever remembered my name before, handed me a single sheet. A generic dismissal. No explanation. No cause. Just the same polite coldness that buildings feel at night. I stared at it, blinking. Jenna was the one who filed it. She had signed off, marked position redundancy, under reason. Redundant. That's what I was now. She hadn't even had the decency to be in the room. I left the office building not knowing whether to cry or scream. I didn't do either. I just sat in my car in the underground parking, the air stale, and the silence ringing. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and felt invisible. Jenna had always been the office favorite. She had a way of making everyone feel like she was just what the company needed, polished, decisive, always networking. She played the game like it was her birthright. She knew how to smile and cut you down in the same breath, and she did it without breaking a sweat. I used to think we were friends back when we started around the same time. She used to borrow my charger, ask me about my weekend, even cry in front of me when her ex cheated on her. I listened, comforted her. I stayed late to finish her reports. I covered for her when she skipped meetings. I didn't mind. I believed in showing up for people. I didn't know she was keeping a mental list of people she could use and people she could discard. The next few weeks were a blur. I tried applying to other places, but the references never came. Jenna had made sure of that. One recruiter told me, a little too kindly, that someone from my last company had mentioned I was too emotionally reactive and difficult to manage. That wasn't just a bad review. That was character assassination. And I knew exactly whose voice those words carried. She was erasing me from the professional world one polite whisper at a time. But here's the thing. Some people break. Others bend. And some get sharper. I moved back to my sister's apartment for a while. Slept on her couch, made instant noodles, and stared at the ceiling most nights. But one day I got an email. It was short, to the point. A former mentor of mine, Miles, who had left the company a year ago, reached out. He'd heard what happened. He wasn't surprised. Said I had talent. Said he was building something. Something that needed someone like me. I hesitated at first. The wound was still raw. But I met him at a cafe downtown. He looked the same, messy hair, direct eyes, and a laptop always open beside his coffee. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He showed me a pitch deck and a funding round already in progress. Then he slid a contract across the table. Co-founder. Coup. Equity. Freedom. The air caught in my lungs. I signed it 2 days later. The first 6 months were war. Building from the ground up is no fairy tale. It's emails at 3 a.m., unpaid invoices, begging for meetings, and wondering if any of it will stick. But it did. We launched our platform, and users came. Clients followed. Investors started watching. One round turned into two. By the end of the year, we were profitable. By the end of the second, we had bought out 3 small competitors and were hiring faster than we could process applications. And then came the acquisition offer from the same parent company that had once owned the firm I was fired from. Only this time, I wasn't walking into the building with a coffee and hope. I was walking in with a pen ready to sign their dotted line. The merger was smooth on paper, but it brought us back under the same umbrella. And that meant Jenna. I hadn't thought of her in months, and yet when her name appeared on the internal comms platform, I felt a shift inside me. She hadn't left. She'd climbed even higher, now heading a department that technically reported to the division I would soon lead.
She didn't know yet.
That was the best part. My name wasn't on the press release. Not yet. The official restructuring was set to be announced Monday. I'd be introduced as the new division CEO, overseeing the units she thought she owned. The same woman who laughed when I lost everything was now about to find out she worked for me. I went in early that Monday, the same way I always used to. But this time, I walked past reception with a security badge that opened every door. I didn't look for my old desk. I headed straight to the executive floor. The lights flickered on as I stepped into my new office. Glass walls, city skyline, and the kind of chair that feels like command. I sat, leaned back, and waited for the 9 a.m. rollout email to go live. When it did, the notifications lit up like fireworks. Congratulations. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you leading this transition. I didn't reply to any of them. I just forwarded the message to Jenna. No subject. No words. Just her name and the announcement. The read receipt came 2 minutes later. I waited. 10 minutes.
20.
And then the knock. My assistant opened the door, and there she was. Jenna. Still sleek, still perfect on the outside. But her eyes didn't match. She smiled the way people do when they've swallowed something bitter. She asked if we could talk. Said she was so happy to see me again. That she didn't know I'd be involved. That we should celebrate. I let her talk. Let her pile on compliments that didn't match the last words she ever said to me. I just nodded. Then she paused just for a second. And that's when her voice shifted. She said she hoped we could keep the past behind us. That misunderstandings happen. That she had no hard feelings. And then, almost too softly, she added that she hoped I wouldn't look too closely at some of the decisions made during the last reorganization. That's when I knew. She wasn't here to celebrate. She was here because she was scared. And I hadn't even opened her file yet. I let her stand in that office for a few moments too long. Silence was power now, not something to escape. I watched her fidget, something she never used to do. Jenna always commanded rooms like she owned the air. But not today. Her voice, always so perfectly rehearsed, started to falter. She asked again if we could talk. Privately. I nodded once and gestured to the door behind me. We moved into the small conference room, glass-walled, quiet. She waited for me to sit first. Smart. Or desperate. Maybe both. She started again carefully. Said she was caught off guard. Said she didn't know I was part of the acquisition. I leaned back in the chair and asked her if she remembered firing me. Her eyes widened just a blink, but I caught it. Then she said something about how those decisions come from above, that she was just following process, and it wasn't personal. That word again. It always is. She smiled like she believed I'd moved on, that I'd let it go, that I'd give her the same benefit of the doubt I once had. But this time, I had questions.
Not just about the past.
About what she'd been doing since I left. I already had access to all internal documents. Financial records, emails, audits. The moment my name was added to the executive portal, I spent hours reading them. And what I found wasn't just incompetence. It was negligence. Deliberate, self-serving decisions disguised as strategy. Projects redirected to friends. Budgets twisted. And performance reviews, altered, sometimes with dates that didn't align with HR logs. There were two in particular. One for a woman named Priya, who left the company quietly a few months after I did, and one for Theo, a developer who'd raised concerns and was quickly labeled unfit for team collaboration. The same language Jenna had used on me. Jenna shifted in her seat as I mentioned their names. Her smile faded slowly, like ink in water. I told her I'd be initiating an internal compliance review. Standard procedure. She blinked again, harder this time. Said she understood, that it was the right thing to do. But she couldn't help adding, carefully, that the company was in a delicate position, and any negative findings might affect investor confidence. There it was, the edge beneath her voice. She wasn't worried about ethics. She was worried about being exposed. I ended the meeting without another word. She stayed seated for a few seconds longer, like her legs weren't ready to carry her weight. I returned to my office, pulled out the notes I'd been compiling for the past week. I'd already begun my own investigation before today. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. If I was going to lead, I had to know exactly what rot had grown beneath the surface. And Jenna wasn't the only one. There was a network, people who rose by stepping over others, who kept their power through manipulation, whispers, and loyalty to each other, not the company. They had built a structure that looked solid but crumbled under scrutiny. One file stood out to me, an internal complaint that had never been escalated. It was stamped resolved within 24 hours, but the resolution field was blank. The employee who filed it? Gone within a week. Another woman. Another casualty. I pulled her contact from old directories and found her on LinkedIn. She replied to my message in less than an hour. We scheduled a call. Her voice shook a little when she spoke, not from fear, but from the memory of what it had taken from her. Jenna had cornered her in a meeting, humiliated her over a missed deliverable, and when she pushed back, she was labeled a disruption. The same script, reused and recycled. By Thursday, I had enough to bring to legal. I didn't do it through drama or noise. I scheduled a quiet, closed-door session with the internal review team. I laid out the documents one by one. The forged evaluations, the erased complaints, the misappropriated funds. I didn't need to exaggerate. The facts were heavy enough. They nodded, said they'd need time to process. But their faces told me it wouldn't take long. Damage this layer doesn't stay buried forever. Friday morning, Jenna didn't come in. Her calendar was blocked off as personal time. But I knew better. She was spiraling. I'd seen her kind before. Not just survivors. Strategists. People who know how to spin the narrative before the truth lands. I expected the email before I even saw it. She'd sent it late the night before. A polished, professional message to senior leadership, expressing concern about recent cultural tensions and recommending a unified leadership message to avoid employee confusion. It was the start of a pivot. She was going to paint herself as a victim of corporate politics. It might have worked, too, if I hadn't already looped in HR and legal. The official notice went out Monday. A full-scale audit. All department heads required to participate. Mandatory disclosure of internal communications. Jenna would be under the microscope. And this time, she didn't control the lens. I didn't hear from her for 3 days. Then Wednesday afternoon, she showed up at my door again. She didn't knock. She waited. When I looked up, her expression was hollow. Her makeup was flawless, but her shoulders sagged. She stepped inside and shut the door. Said she wanted to clear the air.
She apologized.
Said she regretted how things went. That she was under pressure back then. That people made her do it. I listened. Quietly. And then she said the words I didn't expect. I'm scared they'll find the emails. And just like that, the mask dropped. This wasn't about apology. It was a warning. A plea. She was trying to control how far I'd go. She even hinted that she still had copies of things that could muddy the waters if made public. Not threats. Just suggestions. She didn't want to burn the bridge. But she wanted me to know she had matches just in case. That's when I smiled. I told her HR would be conducting interviews next week, and if she wanted to get ahead of it, she might consider being honest. Her hands curled slightly at her sides. She started to say something, but then she saw it, on my desk, open, facing me. The final review draft. Legal had already outlined the key violations. HR had corroborated the old complaints. IT had traced the file deletions to her login. I didn't need to say anything else. She left without another word. That night, I stayed late at the office. I walked through the empty halls, remembering all the days I used to hide my lunch in the kitchen fridge and cry in the bathroom stall, wondering what I had done wrong. I passed the desk where Priya used to sit, the break room where we shared coffee, the corner where Jenna once laughed and said she'd take care of things for me. She had, just not the way I thought. But now it was my turn, and I wasn't done yet. Friday morning came with a storm, both outside and within the building. Rain lashed against the windows as employees moved a little quieter, eyes flicking toward every closed-door meeting. People could feel it, a shift in the air. Jenna still hadn't been seen in person since her last visit to my office. But I knew where she was, locked in damage control, trying to rewrite her story before someone else wrote it for her. What she didn't know was that the story was already out. HR had begun the internal interviews. Compliance had flagged multiple files with metadata inconsistencies. And the IT department had pulled archived chat logs from the backup server she didn't know existed. But none of that mattered as much as the envelope I received that morning. It was slipped under my office door, anonymous, no note. Inside was a printout of an email chain from a year ago, between Jenna and a senior manager named Rachel, who had since been promoted. The subject line was red flag employee. And in it, they casually discussed how to quietly phase out a list of names. Mine was on it. So was Priya's. And 4 others who'd either quit, been demoted, or fired shortly after. The language was cold, calculating. They referred to one woman as a ticking bomb of emotional instability and another as just smart enough to be dangerous. Reading it was like swallowing ice. And the final line chilled me the most. Make sure nothing is traceable. If anyone asks, blame performance metrics. The system protects the smart ones. Jenna had written that. And Rachel had replied, already done. Now I had her. Not just for HR. Not just for optics. But for proof of systemic, intentional sabotage. The kind of thing that didn't just warrant internal consequences. It screamed for a legal review. But I didn't move on it yet. Instead, I did what Jenna never expected. I called Rachel in. She walked into my office with the swagger of someone who thought she was too deep in to be touched. She smiled wide, sat down, and asked how I was enjoying the new view. I handed her the envelope without a word. She opened it, scanned the pages, and the blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She started stammering, said it was out of context, that it was just venting, that Jenna had twisted things. I let her talk for a while. Then I told her I'd be giving her the weekend to consider resigning, quietly, with no severance. Or she could face a full internal hearing on Monday. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She took the envelope and left. I already knew she'd resign. By the end of the day, the message was clear. The old power structure was collapsing. And as much as Jenna tried to stabilize it, she was running out of people willing to protect her.
But she still had cards to play.
And she played one that night. My phone rang at 11:43 p.m. I didn't answer at first. But the second time I picked up, Jenna's voice came through, hushed, trembling. Not with sadness, but with a strange mix of defiance and fear. She said we needed to meet. In person. That she had something to show me. Something I needed to see before I made a mistake I'd regret. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I wanted to know what she was holding on to. I told her to meet me at the quiet cafe near the South Side Library, someplace neutral.
Public.
But not too crowded. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, laptop open. She looked tired, makeup smudged at the edges, but her posture was straight, defensive. She slid the laptop toward me, without speaking. The screen showed a folder of video files.
Surveillance footage.
Old clips.
Some of me.
Some of others. taken without consent. One, from over a year ago, showed me in the break room, crying into my hands after a meeting. Another showed Theo and Priya arguing, their voices muted. It didn't matter that nothing incriminating was said, it was how she framed it. She said she still had access to private security footage from the building archives, back when she managed operations temporarily. She said she hadn't shared it.
Yet.
That if this went public, people might take it the wrong way. That emotional instability was already hard to disprove in high-pressure roles. That perception was everything. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't kind. It was a threat wrapped in concern. I stared at her for a long time. Then I told her I already had a written confession. Her eyes flicked. What confession? I didn't answer. Because the moment she opened her laptop at this cafe's public Wi-Fi, the network filter Miles's security team had set up was already tracking. We'd been waiting. I suspected she had something buried. I needed her to dig it up. And she had. Everything she showed me was already duplicated and flagged. And now officially hers. Tied to her account. Her login. Her fingerprints. I stood up and walked out without another word. By the next morning, the security team had confirmed the file traces. The legal team had updated their notes. And HR had moved up the final meeting. Jenna was called in at 2 p.m. It lasted 32 minutes. When she left the room, her face was blank. Not defiant. Not angry. Just blank. She walked right past my office without a glance. The email went out an hour later. Effective immediately, Jenna Hale is no longer employed by the company. We thank her for her service and wish her the best in future endeavors. It was sterile.
Clean. Cold. Perfect.
But the story didn't end there. Later that night, as I sat in my apartment, sipping tea by the window, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. One sentence. You think this is over, but you don't know what I still have. I didn't reply. I forwarded the number to legal and turned off my phone.
Because I did know.
She had nothing now. And I wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. The days following Jenna's exit were quieter, but the kind of quiet that's never peaceful. It was the calm before fallout, the heavy pause where everyone holds their breath waiting for the next sound to drop. Internally, the company spun her departure as routine. Just another transition. But employees knew better. You could feel it in the way conversations stopped when someone walked into the break room. The sudden respect in how people greeted me. No more backhanded glances. No more whispered alliances. The game had changed. Still, the message she sent lingered in the back of my mind. She had something else. Or, at least she believed she did. I didn't know if it was desperation or a final card tucked up her sleeve, but I wasn't naive. I started working with legal and security more closely. Not just to protect the company, but myself. Because when someone like Jenna starts slipping, they don't fall gracefully. They reach out and try to take someone else with them. Then, just as I thought we'd reached the end of her reach, I got an email. It was from an old internal group alias, one that should have been disabled months ago. Somehow, she'd found a way to access the company's archive drive. The message contained a link, a single line of text and no subject. You may have won, but not clean. When I clicked the link, it led to a Dropbox folder. And inside was a single video file labeled boardroom_export_final, MP4. I play it once. Then again. It was from 2 years ago. A late-night leadership strategy meeting, one I barely remembered. The clip showed me, seated at the table, tired, hair pulled back, rubbing my temples. I was mid-sentence, clearly frustrated, saying something about cutting unnecessary departments and dead weight slowing innovation. In the original context, I was paraphrasing a client's harsh critique. I had actually fought against the downsizing. But the clip ended right there.
Cropped.
Intentional. Stripped of context. If someone shared this, it would look like I was the heartless one. Jenna had saved this. She'd been playing a long game. I stared at the video, heartbeat calm. She wanted me scared again. Paralyzed. It almost worked, but I'd already built too much to lose it now. I contacted IT immediately. They traced the folder. Ironically, uploaded from a personal IP address registered under Jenna's name. Then I flagged the file and requested full legal documentation for a cease and desist order. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Theo. He was hesitant to meet at first. Said he'd moved on, didn't want to stir things up. But when I told him about the video, about what Jenna still had, and how she tried to frame both of us in the past, he agreed. We met at a neutral cafe. He looked tired, like he still carried the weight of what they did to him. But he brought something with him, a thumb drive. Inside was a recording he made months before his exit. Jenna yelling at him in a stairwell, accusing him of leaking budget changes, which he hadn't, threatening his position. He'd kept it not for revenge, but because it had made him feel less crazy, less alone. Now it could help take her down for good. I offered him something. Not a job, not a bribe. A platform. A voice. I told him I'd make sure his side was finally heard. He agreed, on one condition, that it be anonymous. We compiled the files. His recording, the emails she sent about me and the others, the fake performance reviews, and the altered footage. And then we sent them, not to HR, not to legal, but to True Exec, a respected journal that had recently launched a whistleblower series on toxic corporate leadership. They verified everything within a week. When the article went live, it didn't name Jenna directly, but the timeline, roles, and details left no doubt. It didn't name me either, but readers knew. The headline read, "The Culture of Erasure, Inside One Woman's Quiet Rise and One Leader's Fall." It spread fast. Investors started asking questions. Old employees came out of silence. People I hadn't spoken to in years began messaging, thanking me, sharing their stories. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a signal. Jenna tried to respond, of course. Her lawyer issued a formal statement calling the article defamatory fiction. But what she didn't expect was the second wave, the employees who finally stepped forward. Priya submitted a sworn affidavit. Another ex-director came forward with his own paper trail. The company began a full-scale review of her tenure. Whatever card she thought she held over me had turned to ash. But this story wasn't about destroying her. That part was done. Now it was about rebuilding. After the dust settled, I made changes. Real ones. Transparent review processes. Whistleblower protections that actually worked. Leadership training that wasn't performative. And the most important policy, no more silence. If something felt wrong, it would be heard. One morning, weeks after the article went viral, I found myself standing at the large window in my office, looking down at the city. The same skyline I once used to cry beneath in parking lots, too ashamed to tell anyone I'd been cast out. And now? I wasn't above it. I was in it, embedded in the system I had once feared, now reshaped by my hands. But there was one final envelope waiting for me. Hand-delivered. No return address. Inside, a handwritten note. One sentence. You didn't destroy me, but you did remind me who I really was. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the handwriting. It was Jenna's. A final attempt at control? Or maybe, just maybe, a fragment of truth, a crack in her armor. I didn't reply. I placed the note in a drawer. Not out of sentiment. Out of proof that sometimes power doesn't roar. It simply outlasts. And I had. 3 months passed. Enough time for a company to forget the scent of a storm, but not enough to forget how it felt when it landed. Jenna had vanished from the professional world. Or, at least tried to. Her social media had gone dark, her name scrubbed from the company website, her connections trimmed like branches after a fire. But the scars of what she did remained deep in the building's walls. People still whispered her name in elevators, still lowered their voices when I passed. Not out of fear, but because now, silence wasn't a weapon. It was acknowledgement. Internally, the company had begun to heal. A few resignations followed hers. People who had protected her, covered for her, or simply pretended not to see. In their place, I hired intentionally. People who weren't just qualified, but kind. People who knew how to lead without stepping on others. I changed the way performance reviews worked. No more silent checkboxes. Every employee could now see their evaluations before they were submitted. We implemented anonymous feedback systems that were actually reviewed, not buried. And for the first time in years, I heard laughter again in the break room. Not the kind Jenna used to toss like knives, but real soft laughter, the kind that built something. But peace, I learned, doesn't come without confrontation. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind of golden hour calm where nothing seems urgent. My calendar was free, my desk clear. Then my assistant knocked softly and said someone was here to see me. Unscheduled. I frowned. She handed me a card. I didn't recognize the name, Clara Renwick, but the title made my breath pause. External Ethics Council, Independent Oversight Commission. I told her to let her in. Clara entered with the quiet grace of someone used to rooms with secrets. She didn't offer much at first. Just said she was conducting follow-ups related to corporate culture complaints filed last year, cases that had since been reopened in light of the article, the interviews, and the whistleblowing claims. She asked if we could speak privately. I agreed. She had questions, pointed, specific ones. About meetings, about HR practices, about timelines from the past. I answered everything truthfully, my voice calm. But something in her tone shifted about halfway through. It wasn't just routine. It was strategic. Then she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a single complaint, one I hadn't seen before, filed 6 months before I was fired. Anonymous. It detailed a culture of favoritism, selective promotions, emotional gaslighting. It didn't name Jenna, but it described her perfectly. And it mentioned something else. A junior staff member overheard Director Hale refer to an employee, presumably the same woman later terminated, as weak, disposable, and easily manipulated. The note had been flagged, logged, and quietly shelved. Then came the twist. The investigating counsel had reason to believe it was my own file that had been altered, twice. Performance records edited. One leadership recommendation removed. A promotion hold falsely attributed to an emotional outburst that had never happened. And the person who approved the edits?
Jenna, yes.
But not alone. It was my old mentor,
Miles.
My breath caught. Clara didn't look surprised at my reaction. She simply waited. I reread the file twice, my eyes scanning for loopholes, some detail that could clear him. But it was there in ink, his login, his approval, his comment thread. Agreed with Jenna's assessment. Not fit for management. Recommend exit plan within Q2. It hit harder than anything Jenna had done. Because Miles had been the one who gave me my second chance. The one who pulled me from that couch and handed me purpose. Had it all been for show? A redemption arc to mask the guilt of what he helped destroy? Clara stood to leave. Said she had more interviews, more files. But she left the folder with me.
I didn't sleep that night.
I sat at my kitchen table. The documents spread in front of me like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known was missing. Had he known what Jenna was doing all along? Was I just a pawn to balance the optics after the fact? Or worse, had he regretted his role and tried to make it right too late? I confronted him on Monday. Quietly. Just us.
He didn't deny it.
Said he was pressured, that he didn't think they'd actually go through with it. That it was just protocol to keep things quiet and manageable. He had made a mistake. A big one. But he had also given me my second life. I didn't forgive him. But I didn't destroy him either. I asked for his resignation. And I accepted it when he gave it. Leadership, I was learning, wasn't about punishing everyone who ever betrayed you. Sometimes it was about recognizing when someone had already punished themselves more deeply than you ever could. Weeks passed. The company's stock rebounded. Our employee satisfaction survey results reached an all-time high. The board extended my contract, and I declined the performance bonus. Instead, I asked that it be used to fund a new leadership training initiative for first-time managers from underrepresented backgrounds. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't flashy. But it mattered. And then one afternoon, I got a message request. No name. Just a profile with no picture. The message was short. She's trying again. Under a new name. In a new state. I thought you should know. Attached was a job posting from a small tech firm across the country. The job title, Director of People Operations. The applicant history showed a new name, but the resume, the background, the wording, it was Jenna. She was trying to rebuild. Quietly. Secretly. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed it. She wasn't my problem anymore. But I had one final thing to do. That evening, I returned to my old neighborhood. The building where I'd once cried in my car. I parked outside, rolled down the windows, and just sat. I watched the lights flicker on in old offices. Watched people carry coffees inside, check their reflections, prepare their presentations. None of them knew the war that had been fought here. And that was the point. I got out, walked around the block, and stopped at a tiny corner bookstore. I used to pass it every day, but never went in. This time I did. I bought a journal. Leather-bound, simple. And I wrote one sentence on the first page. They laughed when I lost everything, but I smiled when I took it all back. And then I turned the page and kept writing, because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything I built myself, without needing to beg, to betray, or to break anyone else just to rise.
It was mine now.
All of it.